Go for it. We are streaming, Anna.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chair Anna Priest, and I would like to welcome you to the Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment. This is our July 2022 meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the front page of the city's website. It's also linked on our committees page. And we also have the option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you who are with us today out there, welcome. I will now go through and do a roll call for all present committee members who are participating. Please make sure to keep your microphone muted if you're not speaking. When you have a question, please use the raise hand button. I'll call on you and you can unmute your microphone. But please remember to mute it afterwards when you're done speaking. All right, committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello so we know that you are present. Ann Keller.
Present.
Kim Austin.
Hello, everyone. Present.
Tim Orman.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Steve Barron.
I am present.
Allison Ormsby.
Here.
Thanks all. Okay, and then Michael Totten, Maggie Gulick, and Chris Pelrine will not be joining us. Chris might be joining us later. We also have City Council Liaison Sage Turner. Hey, Sage.
Hello, hello. I'll be on video shortly.
Great. And we have Bridget Herring running the show here from the city's sustainability office, and Kira Bullen will not be joining us today. All right, to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a vocal roll call for each vote. Additionally, one more time, make sure you raise your hand, the little raise your hand button feature in your Google meeting, and then I can call on you once you have, if you have a question. All right. Agenda item 1 is to approve our May minutes. If there is a motion to approve those minutes, we can also discuss after the motion.
I move to approve the May action minutes.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second or discussion? I think.
I'll second it.
Was that Kim?
Yes, ma'am. I'll second.
Thanks, Kim. Any discussion, any edits?
It's only 3 bullet points. There's nothing to edit or discuss. It's all on video.
Sounds good. All right. Well, let me do a quick roll call to do a vote to approve. Anne?
Yay.
Kim?
Yay.
Tim?
Yay.
Steve?
Yay.
Allison?
Yay.
And I am also a yay. So the minutes have passed. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is public comment. We did have some public comment come through already before the meeting, so I will read those aloud. First comment comes from Ken Brame with the Sierra Club. The local Sierra Club group strongly recommends passage of this ordinance. We no longer afford either the environmental costs of producing plastics or the impact of microplastic pollution in our air and water. I have seen the impact of plastic bags clogging our drains and floating in the river and caught in the trees along the banks during river cleanups. Many retailers have already made the transition to more sustainable solutions. Even McDonald's has eliminated plastic bags. It is past time for the City of Asheville to do the same. Please approve this ordinance and move it on to City Council for their approval. Thanks for the time you are investing to make our city a better place to live and visit. Ken. The second comment comes from Paul Charbonnet, who is a resident of Buncombe County. The various whereas proposed are unaccompanied by any cited scientific research. The simple fact that we live in the nation's most beautiful tree-covered mountains means we support preserving homes and lifestyles. Let the folks in Texas with oil wells in the semi-desert produce the tiny amount of oil to make plastic bags. Leave our forests standing. Many scientific studies make a favorable case for plastic. What of these have been studied by the committee? Which that favoring paper has the committee considered? Thank you, Ken and Paul, for your public comments. Item 3, updates. 3A, Municipal Climate Action Plan. Bridget is going to lead us on this topic.
Thanks, Anna. And just as a reminder, the public comments will be linked into the action minutes if people want to view them at a later date as well.
Bridget,
yes.
before you start, could you make that bigger so people can actually read that? Because it's awful tiny right now.
Sure.
Thank you.
How's that?
That's better. Thank you. I was just thinking you could
better?
make it full screen so you could, but that's great. Thank you.
So as you all are aware, the city is in the process of updating our sustainability management plan that was adopted in 2009 to incorporate all the additional resolutions and climate initiatives that have been started since that time into one document. And over the past month or so, staff has worked with each of the SACE working groups to kind of go over the initial kind of findings to date from this project. And this is the first time that we've had anything of this sort to even start to review. So appreciate all the working groups taking some time to look at this. And this document really gives you a background and a snapshot of how we got to where we are today to make sure that everybody has the context on the project. But what I really want to draw your attention to that I think is helpful right now is this graphic that shows kind of where we are in the process and what's happening. So what has happened so far is we've had this goal review and did a gap analysis. And then from that started to look at what are the items that either the city needs to continue to do, maybe areas where something hasn't happened yet, and like what are those kind of high impact practices to help us get furthest towards our climate goals. And so from that, we've come up with this list of high impact activities, which is also linked in this agenda. And we have a number of activities listed, and we'll take that list and put it through a prioritization to come up with 20, roughly, identified activities that are then going to get further review. And I think it's important to recognize that that doesn't mean anything that doesn't get elevated to that 20 is going to like necessarily go away. It will still be included in there, but we will have to recognize that we can't do everything all at once and that we need to really prioritize and focus our energy to make sure that we're getting progress on these goals. So that's just kind of a little a graphic that helps us recognize where we are in the process and where we're going. So we have looked at, so this is the list that all of you have looked at before. So just running through this, and really we wanted to take an opportunity to kind of recategorize what we're doing and simplify it to make it more accessible to a wider audience of people, make it more digestible. And so we came up with 3 different goal areas, and then underneath each of those goal areas, there are focus areas, then have activities underneath them. So as you all are aware, we walked through this list with each of you and then offered an opportunity via a Google survey for you to either add additional items to this list or to take an item and try and detail out what you think should be included within that, recognizing that some of these topics can feel a little broad. So, and this document is in reference for review. Unless anybody has anything specific, I'll move on, and questions or things they want to point out about this. I was going to move on to the additional feedback that was received.
I did have a couple things I wanted to ask or comment on. I don't know
Sure.
if it's now or later, Bridget. Which would you rather?
If you want to do it on this document, let's just go ahead and do that now.
Okay. One of the things that I'm struck by is that under goal 1, city-owned assets are resilient, sustainable, and efficient. There is no mention of gray infrastructure, which is the major part of stormwater infrastructure. That to me, although green infrastructure is listed later, the harder to crack and more expensive and more important at this moment for the future is gray infrastructure, the real basic pipes and all the other connected parts to stormwater management. And you see, it specifically says green infrastructure. That is not adequate. So I don't know if we want to add that somewhere in the top or where, but I don't think leaving that out is smart at all because it's going to be very costly and we need to come to terms. And it's going to be something we need to tackle yesterday because it's going to take 30 years. So please note that for AECOM and future discussions that you may have in the city. Let me see if I had any other ones. And farther down, I think the terminology, I think we had a little conversation with this in our work group, but I can't remember for sure about the term neighbor communities. The city fosters, catalyzes things in the Asheville communities. I'm not sure that term is so applicable. I'm not sure how other people feel about it. To me, it could be the business community and neighborhoods or something else, because it sounds like there are different cities within Asheville. I don't really know. So maybe we could talk more about that if other people have ideas. And those are the only two things I wanted to put out there.
Steve, you had a comment, or Bridget, do you want to address Ann's before we move on to Steve? Are you good?
Well, I was going to ask a comment or ask a question of Ann on that, but if Bridget, if you want to go ahead, that's fine.
Go ahead, Steve. You're good.
Yeah. Hey, Ann, I hear you on your point 1 about the importance of gray infrastructure. I just didn't see where this document distinguished between green and gray infrastructure.
Well, if you look down below, it first of all doesn't mention regular stormwater. It does not anywhere in there say gray infrastructure. It only says under 1.5, improve green infrastructure. Okay. That is a separate item. And if we're not going to deal with the gray infrastructure, we're doomed.
Got it. I was looking at Goal 1, Focus Area 1.1, number 1, which is upgrade or replace aging municipal infrastructure to make it more resilient.
Exactly. There's no mention there of stormwater. And I don't know. I think with the significance of that particular piece, it's not just the, could you go back up to the top there, Bridget? It's not just the, grid or whatever. You mention the grid, but you don't mention gray infrastructure.
Okay.
To me, if we don't have stormwater, the city is doomed. The roads are going to be torn up. The houses are going to be messed up. The river is gone. So I think if you're going to list those other things, stormwater infrastructure, the main gray infrastructure needs to be right at the top.
I've made a note.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns they want to?
One quick question to add on, since we're stopping for a second, is how do you imagine towards the end of this process, will we have timelines and goals? Because I think just like any other human, if the city doesn't have committed goals, timeframes, it'll morph off into infinity and there's no accountability there.
Right. And the intention, it's hard to speak to exactly what the final product is going to look like because we haven't gotten there yet. So I caveat this statement with that. But part of this was to look at how do we sequence things, right? And how do we prioritize, recognizing that we can't do everything all at one time, but that we need to say, if we don't start this today, right? And I think stormwater is a great example of that, but that's going to take quite some time to build out. And so, you could, and I think I've used this example in some of our working groups before, but maybe if you were looking at, purchasing offsite renewable energy to help fuel city operations, that might be something that we could look at taking on at a later date because maybe there'll be more favorable procurement opportunities from, through Duke Energy or whatnot, or different pricing as that technology gets more deployed in our region. But like stormwater, we might say, but absolutely we need to start that today. And so that we can all have some kind of agreement and buy-in on what we're prioritizing and how we do roll that out. So in that sense, I definitely think we'll have that sense. Now, when it comes to like firm dates, I don't want to speculate on how that may or may not be included because we also know that depends on different feasibility pieces and also funding, which we can't commit to having necessarily.
Right. Well, and
5
that,
years
for
from now.
example, yeah, and I agree with you. Focus area 1.1, there's a whole bunch of things in there all over the board in terms of how long they take, how much they cost, under what reason, what authority, whatever, as opposed to that one that says there's something about energy, renewable energy. Oh, right there. We've had dates for that. We've had decrease the use of, energy by 4%. We've had those sort of goals now for a long time. I think some of these do have dates we could put on there or add to.
For sure. I mean, where we have that information, yes. I'm just saying, I just want you to be open to seeing how that kind of comes together since we're not at that phase yet. So my answer is I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but yes, part of the conversation is timeline.
Thanks.
Allison?
That was basically my same question. But I guess to clarify with Bridget, what are the next steps? Like you said, the 20 item priority. And then like, for example, the 100% renewable energy for city owned, that's already a 2030 goal. So will SACE see a new version of this, say in September or October, maybe with some of the city targets already also added in?
So I haven't talked about what that timeline piece with the consultant, so I wouldn't want to commit to a date in this moment in time. What I can say is that after this meeting, we are going to work through the prioritization factors that the Climate Resilience Working Group helped determine to kind of get to that list of 20, and then we'll be able to like flesh that out a little bit further. So after we have that prioritization workshop, we can definitely come back to you and say, here's kind of what rose to the top. But that's where I'm at in terms of committing to what will come out and when at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
I'm not going to hector you any further, Bridget, but I do want to kind of, in the same vein as Ann and Allison's comments, I think as I read this list, I kept jumping ahead to what's really important. What do we need to do when, right? I just couldn't help myself. I mean, this is a good kind of list, but when you are coming up with those 20 priorities and then prioritizing within that 20, the approximate 20, I think it would be great if at the appropriate time in your judgment, you could give us as a group or individually opportunity to really comment on what that 20 list ought to look like and which one ought to be at the top and which one might be further down the line. And I'm ready to speak right now on that issue, and I won't. But that's my,
Duly noted, Steve. I hear you.
thank you.
Anyone else before I talk about the additions that we received? Okay, so as you know, we put out a Google survey that was open to every committee members. If there was anything you saw missing on this list that you wanted to have for consideration, or if there was anything that you wanted to make sure was included specifically in a category, and these are the responses that were received. So I don't know if the individual who put this through wants to add any context to these, or if anyone has questions about what they mean, but wanted to give the committee an opportunity to see this, since this information wasn't shared in the working group, since we didn't have it at that time.
Well, I will unmask myself, so to speak. I sent these in, and in rereading them now after having sent them in, I guess my own observation, quick comment, is that bullet 1 really jumps ahead of the game to talking about what some of the priorities ought to be, rather than should something else be included. So I'm not sure that adds to the list. I did on bullet 2, I did want to make sure that high efficiency heat pumps, I don't know whether they need to be specially noted, but looking for opportunities for new construction and upgrades to use them. I go to these Blue Horizons Project technical committee meetings where they are constantly talking about the virtues of this. And I know there are costs also associated with it and practicalities, but I just wanted to make sure that point wasn't overlooked. And then, the energy efficiency standards on the last bullet point for all new city-owned facilities. I guess, Bridget, you had indicated that that's already sort of covered under LEED standards. Is that right?
So some of you may or may not be aware, SACE actually in 2007 went through a process to make a recommendation to council that they pass a resolution that every new construction building over 5,000 square feet be LEED certified gold, unless the energy payback was longer than 10 years. And then there's an opportunity to opt down to LEED silver. So that encompasses energy efficiency requirements that are above our minimum code. So I think if there's a desire to speak more to that piece, please share that and we can take that into consideration. But that's what we currently have in place.
Excuse me, did you say that was just SACE's recommendation from back then, or is it actually implemented and incorporated?
It's a resolution, but I just wanted to give the context that SACE was the group that did the research to make the recommendation to council in 2007. But yes, that is in resolution. And then for the high efficiency heat pump, Steve, if I can ask a question, in terms of context, is it really making sure that we're looking at peak demand reduction and maximizing efficiency in terms of equipment replacements or equipment selection?
Peak demand reduction, yes. I just think also not even necessarily peak demand. If these units can reduce costs over the long term, that they ought to be given serious consideration. And I know greenhouse gas reductions isn't per se a goal, but reducing energy usage in general and making it green, using the grid electricity instead of natural gas. I think those are all valid considerations in in taking a look at this. So
Got
just
it.
make sure it's on the list if it.
Mhm. Got it.
And Bridget, I'm sorry, because I think I was out of town most, if not all the time that this was up, and I didn't even, so that's why I'm voicing it out of turn, not putting it in the Google Doc. It just occurred to me this morning when you sent the materials that there were some things that stood out.
That's fine, Anne. This is the time. I told the consultants I would synthesize the feedback that we got in case we received any public comment on this issue, and also because we're having this conversation. So now is the time if you've got something. If not, great. Thank you all so much for your time. I know that it was a lot of time over the past month to work on this, and it was a lot to digest and give some feedback on. So I really appreciate that, even with summer schedules and COVID and all the things, that you all made time to take a look at this and give me some of your expertise. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I do want to take a moment. Did I see that Rachel Wood has joined us? I wanted to take a moment to introduce a relatively new member of our staff. Rachel Wood has joined the city manager's office. She's one of our new assistant city managers, and she is taken over the pleasure and the pain of having sustainability report to them. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce you all to Rachel.
Thank you, Bridget, and good afternoon, everybody. And it's nothing but a pleasure. I'm excited. I actually had the benefit of being the first of the two new assistant city managers, and I got to play a role in establishing my portfolio. So I asked to have sustainability. So look forward to working with all of you and appreciate the service you provide to the community.
So maybe one day we'll actually be in real person together. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us today, Rachel. It's nice to have you here. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Anna for our next agenda item.
Thanks, Bridget, and welcome, Rachel. We look forward to meeting you in person one day soon, hopefully. All right, so item 3B on the agenda is our working group updates. The first group is the climate resilience group, and I don't know if you have anything else to add. We kind of covered most of what we did in our meeting.
I was just gonna say that we did discuss quite a bit some of the verbiage and need to update and change some of the verbiage in the original presentation from AECOM. And I think we discussed also how the prioritization, how to prioritize, not what to prioritize, but how to prioritize things. In other words, not all the quick and easy, fast done and all that, but we talked about the value of starting something that's really long and expensive earlier and so forth. And I think that we're seeing some of those replies, and certainly Bridget is going to convey some of that further. So I think we did some reasonably decent work in our work group on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I don't think Chris has joined us quite yet, so we'll skip over to Allison. I know she's also going to talk more about plastic reduction later in the meeting, but if there's anything else you wanted to mention, now's your chance.
I mean, I'll just give an update. So our waste reduction working group is myself, Maggie Gulick, and Kim Austin, and we've met several times. We gave some feedback to Bridget about the climate action plan steps, and we have met a lot about waste reduction, which includes both food waste and solid waste, landfill and recycling and composting. So I'll hold the full report until the next agenda item.
Perhaps Steve wants to just give a quick update for energy.
Yeah, Steve, you have anything to add?
Yeah, boy, will it be quick. Let me think what I can remember. Our group did meet with someone from, you need to remind me, Bridget, who is trying to actually get businesses to take some steps on a lights out program that we had recommended, and for which there's a resolution. And the the problem that this person was encountering after making lots of efforts to meet with businesses, tenants, building owners, whatever, is everyone was receptive to the concept, and then she would never hear back and nothing would change. So the challenge is how to, she was looking for advice on steps that might be taken to actually get some movement and make this thing real, get something responsive. Bridget, did you have more on that?
Just to add a little context, that
Yeah.
this was a continuation of the Lights Out initiative that SACY and the Energy Working Group worked with some students at UNCA to get a proclamation about bird migration awareness months, which was passed. And so now Allison, who's on the call, actually manages a fellowship program, and the McCullough Fellow, one of her McCullough Fellows, is working on continuing that project and starting to do some of that education and outreach that we strategized about. And so that's the student that came and gave some feedback, or gave some feedback on steps to date and asked for some ways to engage people to get into that action phase, from informing to action.
Allison, you had something to add?
If I may, yes, thanks for mentioning that, McCullough Fellowship. So the student has, just so everybody knows, has inventoried 105 buildings downtown. And what we're asking is that they turn off their lights between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Out of those 105 buildings, 70 had their lights on at night. So not only does it result in bird death through window collision, but those businesses might be saving money if they turned off at least part of their lights at night. So yeah, like Bridget said, the student's name is Andrea, and she'll be reaching out to business owners about this initiative and see if they'd be willing to turn off at least some of their lights. So she would love to give an update to the subcommittee again in the fall.
Excellent. And I saw that Chris just joined in. Chris, I didn't know if you had anything else to add, but I think we covered most of the energy working group update.
Sure, Steve, I really appreciate it. Sorry for being late. Work is work. I'll just add, it was impressive to see the amount of work that went into that study. It was very thorough, and she had a really good process. But, the unfortunate reality is that implementing any changes is a facility to facility solution. So although it would be nice to see, kind of a blanket approach to this, it's just there isn't a really easy answer, just because of all the difficulties as it relates to the building, whether it's leased or owned, and who is responsible for it, and who has control over it. So I thought it was an interesting conversation, and it helped us look at what the solutions could be. So. But thanks for your help, Steve, for covering that. No other updates from me.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks, everyone, for their updates from the working groups. Next item on the agenda is 3C, potential return to in-person meetings. So there's been talk within the city that we might be able to start meeting in person as soon as September. We could be eligible to go back to in-person meetings. So that would include our September board retreat, which is our annual kind of like let's just get away from this normal SACY agenda, setup and go and do in-person breakout groups. We've done it virtually the past couple of years. But I wanted to get a sense from you all, how you feel about either staying virtual or moving to an in-person format. We would stay with the every other month meeting format for SACY, with the working groups meeting in between. But I wanted to open up that discussion to gauge a sense of how people feel about that. And also, I want to make sure that we are a united front if we do return to in-person meetings about whether we're going to wear masks or not. I don't want people to feel, isolated if they want to wear masks and nobody else is wearing masks. I want us all to kind of be a team on that front. Potentially we could meet outside under a gazebo and do everything outside in person and maybe not have to wear masks. But yeah, just gonna open up the floor for discussion. Chris, I think you were first.
Apologize if I missed it, but if we did decide to go back in person, would it be either or related to virtual or in person in terms of attending the meeting?
At this point, my knowledge would be yes.
Okay. I think it would be a nice change if we at least did it for the our retreat. I support doing it outside. The only issue is planning for weather, which you cannot. So we'd have to figure that out. But I like the idea of at least doing it at least once if we can just try it and then make a decision from there. And I have no issues with masks. I wear them proudly.
Thanks, Chris. Steve, you had a comment, question?
Yes, I do. This is from the 65 and older contingent. I'm a mask wearer too. We aren't going to, who knows what the situation will be like in September. And I don't know whether decisions can be made, on short notice or like, but I think it would be great if we could get together in person somehow. I'd really like to find out if any of you are really real people or not, and confirm that one way or the other. I don't know if they're meeting outside sounds like a great idea to me. As you can tell, I'm quite cautious. I don't know if there are logistics problems to have that as an actual meeting because this thing needs to be, available for people to view, but that would be a technical issue to think about. But anyway, that's my view. I'm a mask person or a very well ventilated indoor person with masks. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
So just to add a little context, we talked about doing an outdoor meeting just in relation to our retreat, because that's a meeting where historically we have moved it to different locations. It's still publicly noticed and following all of those guidelines, but to be able to have a different kind of workspace. So potentially that would only apply in that situation. If we were returning to person as our normal kind of day-to-day operations, we would be back in the first floor conference room of City Hall because we have more infrastructure set up there to potentially be able to stream the meetings. I don't have all of the information about how that might exactly look, but that is the location that we would be on the regular. And just is also an update since I have the floor at the moment. We received word that the governor is going to allow the state of emergency to expire on August 15th. And so that is what allowed us to go to the virtual meetings in the first place. So we're looking to council to figure out what our reality will be after that date. So I will keep you posted as well on that.
Bridget, I have a question about the in-person or I guess you'd say the dual in-person and online that Chris just asked you about. I thought that would be a really big technical issue to.
It is.
Go ahead.
So right now, we're just trying to figure out if we can have in-person meetings and stream them. So not having a hybrid where like some committee members could be online and some, but if everybody was in person, are we able to stream the meetings so people can view them live?
Right.
Is something we're trying to work out because that obviously takes additional capacity. It's not something we did previously.
Right, but you're suggesting not a hybrid. You're suggesting that when we meet in person, we meet in person. There's not two people
Correct.
Stay home. Okay,
Correct.
That's what I was asking. Thank you.
Stage.
Yeah, we're still learning. So the August 15th ending of the emergency order means that we're actually not legally allowed to have virtual meetings anymore. So unless some kind of new hybrid model is allowed, we'll be stuck listening to that. And then if you recall with the ARPA funding, we set aside some money to improve technology for this purpose of this kind of hybrid idea or whatnot. We weren't ready for August 15th. We weren't even close. So, it sounds like we're still trying to figure out what will be available to us and what will those rules be. Oh, I see Brad is on with us and he knows. Brad is the man. He'll know.
Thank you, Councilperson Turner. Just to chime in on all of this, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Brad Branham. I'm the city attorney for Asheville. This is something that we are currently looking at. We've been looking at for a while, both from a technological and logistical standpoint, as well as satisfying the legal requirements for public bodies. What has been said already that's of utmost importance is that the governor's state of emergency, unless something changes, is going to be lifted on August 15th. What that means is that the governing boards of any city, county, other local government are no longer automatically able to meet virtually at that point. And please note that I said the governing boards, which would mean city council for us. Rules regarding boards and commissions, such as yourself, are quite a bit more murky. And we believe, and the North Carolina School of Government has actually weighed in on this as well, that there may be a legal allowance without any new legislation for advisory bodies such as yourself to continue to meet virtually. So we are exploring all of that right now. I think the city council is going to want to weigh in on it and give some consideration as a body about how they would like to see this progress forward. But we do not believe it's going to be as black and white automatic for advisory boards as it will be for the city council, who has already transitioned back to in-person meetings. So please stand by for now. We will keep you updated. Things may change starting in September. There may be a phased approach. But we suspect at this time there is a likelihood that virtual meetings for all advisory bodies may continue to be a reality as an option. What is likely not to be very viable is a hybrid situation where we have some members participating virtually and some members participating remotely. That just becomes a very technological, nightmarish situation that we're trying to avoid. So I think there's going to be a certain amount of autonomy and preference of the boards themselves. So likely what you will hear next is us coming to you, asking where your preferences lie. And then we will get with city council and get back to you as soon as possible on that. So sorry to interrupt.
Thanks for all the information, Brad and Sage. Does anyone else want to chime in specifically regarding the September board retreat and whether they would prefer it to be in person or virtual? Tim?
Yeah, I'm pretty open-minded. Either way, I like the outdoor idea, but I'd be comfortable with whatever the group decides.
Thanks, Tim. Allison?
Hi, I also prefer the outdoor idea. I think in person, especially for a retreat, is great. I think it's nice, and it'd be nice to see you all in your bodies in real person. And I also am wondering what the date of the retreat is, just so I can get it on my calendar. Do we have a date?
Yes. It would still be at our normal meeting time.
Yeah. Let me pull it up.
So that's September 21st at 3:30.
And that means we'd have to have if we're going to do our normal breakout groups and discussions, we do need some kind of facilities to do that sort of stuff. And I guess that's already being thought about or has already been decided upon.
Well, we wanted to check in with you today to see where you were at, and then I will be doing some work to figure out what are our options logistically and then come back with you for that.
Yeah, one of the suggestions, if we did meet outside, there's a lot of pavilions that the city own that we could meet at that might have Wi-Fi. We could do the old-fashioned whiteboard, roll it out there if we need to, or just like sticky notes. I don't know. We haven't really thought that far ahead, but if it is outdoors, it's going to be very tech limited, obviously. Kim, did you want to chime in?
We've used whiteboards and stuff in the past when we've done these without any issue in various locations. So I don't think that's an issue. I just wanted to I just wonder how many different spaces you can have in a gazebo where people can actually not overhear each other and be conflicted about what's happening. And because normally we've been in totally different rooms. So that's another thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think an outdoor meeting would be great for September. Also, we could always just put earplugs in, Anne, if we're just too tight.
You can't hear your colleagues talking about your topic if you have earplugs in. So I don't know that works, but
no, that actually might be better.
Good point.
Okay, so it sounds like pretty much everyone else has chimed in. We're all good with an in-person meeting, preferring outdoor space. Of course, that is, like Steve said, weather dependent. We'll just do our best. But Bridget and I will put our heads together and figure out where that September meeting will be. And then after that will be our December meeting, which we will at that point figure out whether that's going to be virtual or do we even meet in December, Bridget?
November.
It will be November.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's right. That's 2 months after September. I know my months in order. Yeah, so we won't meet in December, but we will meet again in November and we'll decide whether that's going to be virtual or in person or whatever that looks like based on this whole governor's
Yes,
decision.
we'll have more guidance at that time.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments before we move on? All right. Item number 4A on the agenda is recommendation on plastic reduction policy. Allison, mic is yours.
Thank you. Okay, to give a little bit of background, just to remind us what happened. So the waste reduction working group, which again is myself, Kim, and Maggie Gulick, we met with the coalition, Plastic Free WNC, that has some members of Mountain True and Sierra Club and others, some of which are on this call now if we have questions. We met with them in April. Then they came to the full SACE meeting in May for a presentation, which we all heard. And then they came back and presented again to the SACE working group in July, early July. So now we have this revised ordinance. And I will say that our working group did provide some feedback during both of those meetings, sub-meetings. And we had a few points of concern. One was the fee. So the idea would be to ban plastic bags, and then there would be a 10-cent fee for paper bags. So there's some concerns around that fee. We also, part of the Waste Reduction Committee is Jess Foster, who's with the city solid waste, and Bridget. And we raised a question about enforcement, right? Like, how are we actually going to implement this? Some questions about those logistics. And then the last question we had was about scope. So at the beginning, it was straws, plastic bags, and styrofoam, and single-use plastic serviceware. So now you see a somewhat scaled back version, but we still have some concerns about the wide scope of this proposed ordinance. So I just wanted to give that update. I wanted to call on Bridget for any comments from Bridget.
Thanks, Allison. I just want to thank everybody, including definitely the Waste Reduction Working Group and all the members of Mountain True and the WNC Plastic Free Coalition for all of the work that was put into this. There's been a lot of time, love, and attention that's been put into it to date. And I think that we all want to do better on eliminating the use of single-use plastics, and just sometimes have differences of the path of how we're going to get there. So I did add a memo to this this item that kind of gives a little bit of background about where the request came from and the actions that we've taken to date, just for anybody who's new to this conversation, and then some pros and cons, and some recommendations more from the staff perspective and that internal piece. And I also know that, there were some questions raised about the 10-cent fee, which is something that would not be collected by the city, but kept by the retailers. And there's some questions about our authority to do that. And so I did want to take a moment to introduce Brad back into the conversation to kind of share that opinion from the city on that specific piece, and then allow you all to ask questions if you had anything about that.
Thank you, Bridget. And I believe you've covered it to a certain degree. We have been working closely with Mountain True on the proposed ordinance for some time now, and we have been collaborating as much as possible with them on some of the concerns that we have. Primarily, many of these have been addressed. However, the issue regarding the the paper bag fee remains. And this is something that, as many of you know, we're in North Carolina, in a state in which we have a system of laws that allow local governments to enact rules locally only when specifically authorized for the most part. So this is a big difference between us and states across the country who you see oftentimes doing very innovative things at the local level. We have quite a bit more lids on our jars, so to say, in terms of trying to be progressive and innovative about these sorts of things. So we have been exploring whether or not the authority exists for a local government to be able to require private businesses to charge this fee, a fee that is, as Bridget said, not actually collected by the city. So this is not a city fee. It would not be a tax. This isn't something that it comes to the city in any form or fashion, but would be a requirement for these businesses to charge. Our research at this point indicates that we would be the first to do such a thing in this or any other context. So the question remains, and it is one that we are somewhat concerned about, whether or not there is legal authorization for local governments to take that action. We are hoping the answer is yes. If not, we're hoping that we can navigate to some sort of a compromised secondary option. But at this point, we have not reached the point of consensus on feeling comfortable that the legal authority exists in North Carolina to do this particular part of the ordinance. Now, that sounds negative, but I want to give you the good news as well, which is we've been working for some time to feel comfortable with the ability to ban plastic, single-use plastics in this manner altogether. And we feel for the first time in a while that this is actually very fertile ground, legally speaking, for local governments. We're just having a problem with this one particular aspect. So we're hoping that we can eventually get over that hump and figure out how to resolve that remaining issue, but it does remain as of today. So I'm giving you this extensive information because this is also what I'm going to be sharing with the city council if and when this ordinance comes before them. And we feel at this point, we cannot give a full legally authorized recommendation for the ordinance as it is written because of this one particular portion. But again, we continue to work with Mountain True and their legal partners in order to see what can be done to resolve that remaining issue. I'll hand it back to Bridget, but I want to make sure that you know I'm here for any additional questions that the committee might have of me about this issue.
Thank you, Brad. Oh, looks like you have a question.
That was me. More a comment, I guess I would say. So if I understand the theory correctly, this whole idea of a 10-cent paper bag fee is to help organizations, that need to buy plastic bags to offset the increase in overhead cost, right? Because paper bags are more expensive. So, let's charge the people who want to use that and not charge everybody. But if this is really the only, step that's having an issue, why not go to these companies and say, okay, this is the ordinance that we're proposing. Yes, it's going to have an increase in your overhead like everything else that's happening right now. And to me, I've never purchased 50,000 plastic bags, so I don't know what the increase in cost is, but I can't imagine it being too much more. And I understand there's other aspects to plastic bags that have been discussed as it relates to equity and access to those types of things. But To me, it almost seems like something that it could just be implemented and they could just increase their overhead. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, Chris, I think to respond as best as I'm able, I think you are correct in terms of the rationale behind the 10% fee. It is intended to offset that cost for the retailer / merchant for the additional cost of buying paper bags as opposed to plastic. I do see that Susanna Knox is actually on this call and has raised her hand, and she may be able to provide some additional context to this as well. So perhaps the smartest thing I can do is hand it over to her and see if she wants to chime in at this point.
Thanks, Brad. I'm sorry, I'm for some reason having trouble. Oh, there I go. I was having trouble turning my camera on. Thanks so much. And Chris, to answer your question, the fee is, and the reason for having the business retain the fee is definitely to help them offset any costs that they may have for having to provide more paper bags in light of the plastic bag ban. But it also has two other purposes. One is that it's been found in many jurisdictions across the country to have a very desirable effect on encouraging reusable bag use. So it is intended to help the businesses, but it's also intended to reduce any unintended additional pressure on paper resources. So that's an important component of the fee as well. And I want to thank Brad as well for remaining open-minded about the fee provision. We are working on putting something in writing about our position, but in short, we believe that the local government authority to impose this type of fee comes from the same state laws that give local governments authority to ban the plastic bags. I think the city, as Brad alluded to, has a number of different options about how to approach this issue. The city could collect the fee, which is what many other local governments have done and what some other local governments in North Carolina are proposing. The fee could stay with the businesses, which I think has that benefit of defraying their costs. And we don't prefer this, but the fee could be made sort of a voluntary part of the ordinance, which the ordinance does have some kind of voluntary ideas for businesses and citizens to take advantage of to further reduce single-use plastics. But we do think that this is the best option. We believe there is legal authority for it. And I don't know if this is the place to elaborate on that. As Brad mentioned, we are continuing to work together on that. But I just want to let everybody know that we're working on it.
Thank you, Susanna.
Thanks. Thank you.
Steve, you had a comment, question?
I do. Let me follow up on this. I had comment on this section, the section 4, and also one on section 5. But let me speak to section 4. I will say this this whole provision gave me pause, to be perfectly honest. In general, I like the draft a lot. I think it's great. I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I think the idea of substantially restricting single-use plastics is a good idea. This provision gave me pause for 3 reasons, and I just wanted to put it on the table and tell you where I, at least before this meeting, ended up as to what I thought might be the best way to go. One is the concern that legal has raised, that Brad raised. There, as the memo from the is it from the city attorney that Bridget had shared with us said, there is this legal uncertainty about the authority to impose this charge. This would also be the first time, except for that temporary Outer Banks provision, that any city would be doing this. So one question I had, or one thought I had is, if there's really, why ask for trouble, I guess? If there is this legal uncertainty or this novelty or unprecedented, we're going to ban plastic bag or restrict plastic bags for the first time, why go out on a limb, maybe pause for now on going out on what I would see with going out on a limb and imposing this. The second pause that I had, and this is really more fundamental to me, is this is an ordinance to restrict single-use plastics. And I agree with most, if not all, of the whereas clauses that address, which almost all address plastics. This provision, Section 4, doesn't regulate plastics. It regulates paper bags. And so I'm not sure that this is the right place. It seems like this is sort of maybe a bit of, at least in the context of the way this ordinance is drafted, a bit of regulatory overreach for me. And then this is sort of my own, where I come from on all of this. For what it's worth, is the third reason for pause that I had. I'm happy to let Whole Foods decide what it wants to do. Its policy now, as I understand it, as of yesterday when I was there, is that you can have a recycled paper bag with no charge. Let them make that business decision, is what I would say. Why do we need to be reaching out at this point on this, particularly on a plastics ordinance? So sum all that up, and let me tell you what my suggestion would be. I circle back to Susanna's comment at the very end, her least likely or less likely option. Make this voluntary. There's a list in the front in Section 1 that says, we strongly encourage businesses, in addition to the requirements of this, to do these things. I would add two things that move the substance of Section 4 over to Section 1 and add the two items. They could be the initial ones to emphasize their importance. A would be making reusable bags available for purchase at the point of sale. Strongly encourage that. That's on the strongly encourage list. And that indeed is what the sentence in Section 4 says already with respect to reusable bags. And then also make this, do the strong encouragement for recycled bags, making recycled paper bags available for purchase at the point of sale for no less than 10 cents or some such to that effect, and maybe have a brief reference to the exception in there. But I'd go the voluntary way. I think this is sort of jumping ahead, legal uncertainties, and outside the scope of what the ordinance otherwise seems to be wanting to do. I understand the reasons for it, but this might not be the best way to go on this. I'm done with my comments on that, and I've spoken a lot. I will stop, but I do, before the end of this, have a much shorter suggestion or comment on Section 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to remind the committee and to the guests of SACE, including Mountain True, that you can only make a comment if you are directly addressed or directly asked a question. So if no committee members have pointed questions for Anna or Susanna, I can't call on you. So I'm going to skip down to Anne. She had her hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. I pretty much agree with what Steve said. I think that the biggest problem are the single-use plastic bags. Let's get those out of there. That's pretty simple. It sounds like we have the authority. I don't know why it's, I go in and occasionally forget my reusable bags and get a brown bag at Ingles. They don't charge me for it. It's just sitting there. And I don't know why we would want to complicate anything. I know what we were just told, that it seems to dissuade people from not bringing their own. It makes them more likely to bring their own. But honestly, a 10-cent fee would make a difference to most people probably. So I think we should just get the complications out of there and not worry about a 10-cent fee for a paper bag.
I had a question for Allison. Can you clarify whether the Plastic Reduction Committee supports the fee or does not support the fee?
I don't necessarily feel comfortable representing the whole committee, but I think I would agree with what Ann just said, and I think the committee would agree that in order to make, so what we've been saying all along is that the original ordinance was very confusing. It was confusing to understand. It was really complicated. So this whole time we've been saying, let's streamline it. Let's make it as clear as possible. And that is why we suggested removing some of the other items like straws or serviceware at this point, right? That it makes sense to, in the first year or two, just make sure it's a success and that it goes smoothly. So the fee issue is a little bit of a complication because of who collects it, what happens to it, etc. So having the business collect it was a little simpler because then the city doesn't have to manage, it's like not new personnel to manage that. But on the other hand, like what Ann said, and Steve also, is that the main point is just reducing plastic use. We don't want to shift it necessarily to paper use. We really want people to bring their own bag. So I think the subcommittee supports clarity and the clearest process possible, and also keeping in mind not creating additional work for the city, right? So another issue was around enforcement. And so if, say, somebody goes to a store and the paper bag's not available or whatever, and they get mad or whatever, or they find out someone is using plastic bags, then they would report it, and that creates a little bit more potential work for the city. So that was a long-winded, vague answer.
Thank you, Allison. And I had another follow-up question for Brad. What happens if the city passes the resolution with the fee included, and if it gets blocked by the state? Do we get sued as a city, or can we go back and revise the resolution without the fee? Can you tell me a little bit about that process?
That's a great question, and I'm going to do my very best to not do what attorneys normally do and over-talk this. We could probably discuss the sort of hypotheticals for a long time. I'm going to see if I can give you the Reader's Digest version of that and say that our suggestion would be to add language into this particular ordinance whereby if any particular provision was deemed to be beyond our authority or illegal, the remainder of the ordinance would survive. Okay, this is a very common legal device that we use when crafting legislation. So we would add in one of these particular clauses where something falls out, the rest survives. The question, I think, is primarily focused around what could the state do? And I think that's a very important consideration. And what if they did do something? So to answer your question first about what could the state do, it's important to note that the state has almost supreme power over local governments. However, there are some constitutional limitations on what they can do purely locally. So the state has the ability to pass general laws that apply to the full state, or it can deal with local laws, or what we call special laws that are just for specific towns, counties, or areas. And this is actually one area of law that is prohibited by our state constitution to have the state deal with issues on a local act basis, which means in order for them to, say, pass something that would restrict Asheville from doing this, they would have to do it on a statewide basis, which is much, much more difficult for the legislature to do. They would actually have to get passage through the Senate and the House, maybe even bipartisan support for that, as well as getting the governor to approve that. Now, we're in an election year, so these dynamics are subject to change. But the good news is, and I must point out, the ability for the legislature to undo this, quote unquote, via a purely local act is actually restricted. So they would have to deal with this on a statewide basis. I think it's much more likely that the state, if they were really angry about this, would attempt either to do something on a statewide basis or just do something completely unrelated to give some retribution to Asheville. That sounds somewhat petty, but that is absolutely what's happened in the past from time to time. So I think we always have to be at least somewhat concerned about what might happen to Asheville on other fronts. That is always a point of contention with the legislature and this local government. But I think there's a limit on what the state could do locally to deal with this particular ordinance. So I know that's a lot. I'll try to stop there and see if you've got any follow-up questions.
Well, I mean, from what I can tell from my standpoint is, we are just the advisory committee. We can leave the fee in there if we want to. ultimately it's going to be the city council who decides whether to keep the fee in or not. So, there's not a lot of pressure on us as Stacy to decide today whether we want to leave it in there or not. It's not like the make it or break it moment right here. So for those of you who are, wavering between whether or not to leave it in there or not, just keep that in mind. Steve, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, am I on? I'm not on mute. No. Yeah, Anna had raised her hand, and I guess I wanted to hear if she had thoughts, or Susanna had thoughts on my suggestion to consider moving the substance of that provision over to the strongly encouragement list.
Thank you very much for asking that. I'll take a stab at it. We have studied probably over 100 ordinances across the country that are varying degrees of this kind of setup, and believe that this is the best practice to keep people, or to get people to bring their own reusable bags to the store with them. Paper bags obviously have their own environmental impact, and it's not small. And so we don't want a run on paper bags if we get rid of plastic. If you go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, you see a ton of people use paper bags. They feel less bad about it because it is paper and it is recyclable, and it doesn't live in the environment for forever, which is understandable. It's the less bad option. But the best option is to get rid of, or to get people to bring their own bags with them. And that's why we want to keep that in the ordinance. We understand the concerns about the legality of it. And Susanna's been doing a ton of research behind that. There are several ordinances across the country that are framed in this way, where there's a ban on plastic with the fee on paper in Dillon's rural states. So we've seen that happen. I know North Carolina is a special beast, and that's not to be taken lightly. But if we're gonna do this, we want to do it right, and that's why we think the fee on the paper is important.
Thank you, Anna. Anne, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I was just commenting or wondering about the comment you just made a minute ago, Anna, about not needing to make a decision. I feel like I'm not sure there's a reason to drag this out. I mean, there is a need to come to some decision about it, I would say. But if people on SACY don't think we should make a decision, I guess we shouldn't. I feel like we should make a decision whether to leave the fee in there or not, and then to finally go ahead and pass the resolution or not. I'm not sure what the point of putting it off now until September would be.
No, let me clarify what I meant by my statement is that we can leave the fee in there as it's written right now. We can vote on it all together, or majority can vote on it and pass it on, and then let council decide to reword the resolution as we propose it to council to remove the fee or not. That's all I'm saying. We are going to vote on it today.
Good, and I think it's important for us to give our best advice to council. I mean, that's what they ask us for. So thinking all these nuances over, what do we think is the best route for the city to take now? I'm really excited about the fact that single-use plastic bags could be banned. That's like the biggest bang for the buck, and that's straightforward and simple. I feel like complicating it might not be the best idea, but I guess I'll hear everybody else's thoughts.
I think it could be argued that paper is just as bad. I mean, I don't know all the details. I know Anna and Susanna probably know like the nitty gritty of like the carbon it takes to produce paper bags and, all of that. But I think, like Anna said, reusable bags is definitely the way to go. And omitting the fee from this ordinance, this resolution, in my opinion, it would be a huge oversight. Chris, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I guess one last comment. So, I, in my professional role, I deal a lot with single-use plastics in the private sector. And, I appreciate that we might have an opportunity as, the city of Asheville to do something like this, which would in theory lead to behavior change, right? Because that's more or less, as we were discussing, a fee to do something is more or less an opportunity to do something else, right? So, but if you take that, it's my opinion that the majority of these organizations that we'd be asking of is within the private sector. And, of course, if we're just going to name off the top 5 large, private sector organizations that we'd be targeting, this is a big issue. There's a lot of organizations that are getting pressure to eliminate single-use plastics in the workplace. And, the hope would be is that, some of these organizations would start to adopt it and implement these best practices to get the general population to reduce single-use plastic use. So that's just adding to the fodder here about, an attempt to get what we want, which is reduce single-use plastics. I'm just not sure if it's appropriate for us to push to have it be a part of the ordinance to have the fee. That's all.
Thanks, Chris. Steve, you had another comment?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I really do think that the way it's drafted with all the whereas clauses, which provide the foundation for the action, that paper bag regulation is just outside the scope of what this ordinance is. And that given the legal uncertainties and given the fact that I just don't feel comfortable telling a business like Whole Foods that they that they can't continue to supply paper bags unless they start charging for them. I understand that will help induce for some using reusable bags, maybe that's the case, but I don't think this is the moment in time and the way this is drafted to force that issue. So that's sort of where I came out on it. And I don't know if it's possible procedurally, and if the majority disagree, that's fine. But if it's possible as a matter of procedure to endorse this with the recommendation to move the substance of this section to the strongly encourage list in section 1, I'd like to, if I don't know if that can be done, but that's something at least I wanted to put on the table for discussion.
Sure. So logistically speaking, we would, next, someone would have to make a motion to approve the resolution as written, and then we would discuss the resolution and we could amend it during that discussion, and then we would all vote on the resolution, including or not including that resolution. Allison, you had a comment?
Yeah, maybe I could clarify process a little bit also. So I would encourage us to have a full discussion of this, and then we could say, someone could move, like me or someone else could say, I'm hypothetically that I move for Stacey to support this ordinance as drafted with the amendment as proposed by Steve to remove the 10-cent fee. And then we could say, oh, Stacey supports the ordinance with these amendments, and that goes to City Council. Is that correct, Anna?
Anna, you're on mute.
You're muted. Or I might ask Bridget. Bridget has a point of order too.
Yeah, I want Bridget to chime in here.
This is just a recommendation that's going to go to council. So you can move to say you support the the proposed ordinance with, moving the 10-cent fee to the purpose section, if that's what you were landing on. Hi, Steve.
Hi. I just wanted to note that I have a quick comment on section 5 when we're through with this. I didn't want it to miss that. So you tell me the appropriate time for that.
go ahead and do that, and then we'll go to Sage.
Okay. My thought on section 5, which is the restriction on styrofoam. To
Hey,
use the
Bridget,
brand
can
name.
you move section 5? Oh, okay. It's not on there. Okay. Never.
Yes.
I can pull it up.
Okay. Yeah. I just noticed that if you look at section 3B, there's an exception that allows for businesses to deplete their backstock of plastics that they bought up to 30 days prior to the ordinance becoming effective. And there was no such comparable parallel provision for styrofoam, polystyrene. And I thought, well, I didn't understand why. And I thought it might be a good idea to add a provision that allows restaurants and others that use polystyrene to get rid of their back inventory for some period of time. Similar to 3B, there would be something in 5 to that effect. I don't know if that had been thought about or not, but I wanted to point that out.
Hey, this is Sage chiming in. This is a great discussion. Thank you. We have Brad listening. We have Rachel Wood listening. I'm imagining that your recommendation could be as simple as we overall recommend all of these items. Our committee, these are the items we discussed. Whether or not, if the fee is the big deal, maybe make it recommended, but you don't need to go piecemeal and do the legal language. Well, I think Brad can do that for us, just so you can move through. Like if you have ultimately a couple points to make, just make them bullet points of a recommendation for us. And then know that I will also speak with councilwomen and share the input from this, extensive conversation as well on your behalf.
So you're saying, Sage, that we can just leave the fee in there, but also make a note that we were not all unanimously in agreement on the fee?
Yeah, and I think, some of these items, it's a lot we have a lot of items in movement. And so I believe that councilwomen will come and watch this video and hear your thoughts, that this conversation will help them. And so, yeah, just giving some recommendations. We've read the policy. We feel like the fee may be an issue. If it becomes a legal hurdle, maybe put it under recommended but not required or something, just whatever your overall thoughts are. You don't need to piecemeal through section needs to be over here instead of there. That's all. I'm just trying to save you the detail crunching.
Great point. Thank you, Sage. How does everyone feel about that?
But I thought this was a resolution that we were supposed to vote on. So if in that case, we have to have whatever the document says be the things that we want to support or not support as a resolution, and then we take a vote.
Brad, is this committee trying to review the exact resolution as is, even though it could come to council different by way of other committees too?
So the good news, if you choose to see it this way, is that you've got fairly wide latitude. You are an advisory body, which means you have the ability to provide a recommendation with a great deal of specificity or a much lower degree of specificity as you choose appropriate. I think that council would prefer that you give them as much as possible so that they can truly ascertain your position on this matter. That could range from someone saying, I just make a motion to support this as is, all the way to someone saying, I would make a motion to support the proposed ordinance with the following changes and list those out. Or, as Sage mentioned, you can be somewhat vague about this and just say, I just don't agree with this provision, or that I would like to see the inclusion of the time frame that's dealing with plastic bags also apply to styrofoam. And we can work those details out. We can write that language, but I would suggest that you should feel free to make a proposal in the form of a motion regarding support or lack of support with any changes as you feel comfortable so that the city council can truly hear your voice to the greatest degree possible.
Thanks, Brad. Allison?
This is all very interesting. I think I know that we have to send this to a vote, and I would feel more comfortable if we came to some kind of agreement and Stacey had a pretty strong opinion, because I feel like it's our job as a Sustainability Advisory Council to give advice to City Council, since it's sustainability and this is our domain. I'm wondering, kind of looking at Brad, but others, what if we said optional 10-cent fee? Because I see what Steve Barron is saying about if all of a sudden we say paper bags are 10 cents and everybody who has paper bags therefore has to charge 10 cents, that really changes the landscape. But if we said that businesses could opt to charge 10 cents if they want to cover their bag costs for a paper bag, then that somehow feels like there's a little wiggle room. I don't know. Brad, legally?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a viable option, Allison. You could say that the board would like to make a motion to support the ordinance with the 10-cent bag fee being changed to an optional or recommended, but without being mandatory.
If what I took to be what I intended to be the kind of the sum and substance of making it optional by moving it to the strongly encouragement section and listing it there, along with strongly encouraging reusable bags.
So do we need to make a motion, or where are we right now?
If you're ready to make a recommendation, it needs to come through the form of a motion, and it needs a second and needs to be voted on.
I know we haven't heard from all Stacey members, so I just want to make sure that everyone's had a chance to chime in if they want to chime in on this discussion before we do the motion. It looks like we got Tim raising his hand.
Yeah, I've been listening very intently, and I think it's been very good and enlightening discussion. I agree with the different perspectives, including Steve's, but I do think that the task force and Anna, they did quite a bit of research on this. They've studied many different ordinances. I think they gave a compelling presentation last time and had a lot of reasons for what's included. I do like Anna's idea of, including the fee and maybe saying it's optional rather than taking it out entirely and then letting legal and city council make sort of the final decisions. That's where I would kind of lean.
Hey, Tim, I'm not sure I got that. I'm gonna jump in and ask a question. Do you mean, because I think we were at least at one point here talking about taking it out of required and putting it down as optional. Is that what you were saying?
Well, I tend to go more with what the task force or whatever they're calling themselves, Mountain True, what they're recommending. I feel like they did a lot more research over many months, and we've kind of just gotten more of a snapshot. So I don't want to just necessarily just throw out what they've done. Could I ask Anna Alsobrook just for maybe one last opinion on this? Or is that too confusing? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch what opinion you wanted to ask.
Just the importance of keeping the fee in there. I know you've said that.
Oh.
What I don't want to do is kind of undermine the overall approach, because you've studied many different ordinances from many cities.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think that model is the best we can do at taking stabs at climate change. And that's what we should go for. So that's the best model. And places that have not implemented the fee have seen reductions of plastic in the environment, but they're seeing dramatic increases in paper bags. So That's why we want to curb paper bags by putting a fee on them. So I think it would make a dramatic difference to leave it in the ordinance as it is.
Yeah, without input, and I've been to Trader Joe's where, I just see people gobble them up without any concern at all, with paper bags. And I think they do have quite an environmental impact. I get Steve's point that it's sort of conflating, plastics with paper. But I tend to want to stick with the original. That's where I am.
Thank you, Tim. And I agree with Tim. I think that it's a really important thing to leave in there as well. Kim, you also had your hand raised.
Yes, and I'm just going to bring up the question of equity and lower income communities. Is there going to be a provision there that we can waive that for certain individuals, or and I do like the option of charging 10 cents because it does give the business owner some flexibility, although I do understand the concern of increasing paper use. So if we could speak to that maybe a little bit.
I can answer that. We have reached out to over 21 different organizations that deal in the equity realm and got feedback from them on how this version of an ordinance would impact the people that they work with. And they've been overwhelmingly supportive and positive of it. And they are helping us strategize how we educate folks in their communities about the ordinance and how it'll affect them in their day-to-day lives, as well as doing a reusable bag distribution for those communities so that they don't have to get hit with that 10-cent fee. That being said, within the ordinance, we have included an exemption on the fee for anybody using an EBT card so that anybody on food stamps, SNAP, or WIC programs will not get charged that particular fee. And that's pretty standard kind of across the board, across the country. You see that language in a lot of these ordinances, no matter what their framework is. And I want to say there's been a lot of studies, social science studies specifically, that show implementing a fee on these things really does cause behavior change. It really does get people to bring their own bags with them when they come to the store, or not even use bag, just put stuff back in their cart and drive the cart to their car so that they don't have to feel that 10-cent fee burden.
Tim, do you still have your hand up from previously, or is it a new question? Okay, that's all right. I think that concludes our discussion. Is anyone willing to make a motion of the resolution, or what are we calling this? An ordinance?
Ordinance.
Thank
because
you.
It would be a regulation. That's different than a resolution.
Sorry. Steve?
I would like to make a motion to support and recommend adoption of the draft ordinance with two changes. One change would be to move the provision for encouraging, in section 4, encouraging reusable bags and giving the option to charge a fee for recycled paper bags to the list on section 1 of items being strongly encouraged of businesses. The other change would be to add a provision similar to section 3B that would allow for businesses that use covered businesses that use polystyrene to deplete their backstock before completely converting away from that.
You
Okay,
need a second.
Yes, now we need a second, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't back up and vote on no, okay, we need a second. We can't back up. We're moving forward.
I'll back up if you want me to back up. I just whatever.
Allison.
Can I amend Steve's motion?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
You don't know?
Just procedurally, I can chime in and help you all out a little bit on this. There's a motion on the floor, and before we want to go now, anyone can offer a friendly amendment at this point, which Steve would have the ability to accept or not, which would automatically change his motion. But we don't want to offer any proposed amendments or alternative motions until this is either voted on or it fails for lack of getting a second. So feel free to offer any friendly amendments, and then Steve can either accept them or not at this point, but then we'll have to see if a second is offered or not.
I would like to make a friendly amendment that instead of moving what Steve's talking about to the proposed background area, I would like to keep the second amendment, second thing he said about this polystyrene, that's fine, depleting stocks, but make the 10-cent fee optional, put the word optional in front of the 10-cent fee and keep it where it is in the language. That's the motion. Realizing that Anna and Tim don't support that.
So Steve, that's up to you to either accept that or not.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't speak, I don't want to speak especially to that particular language using the word optional. This is just the point of, Allison, if I understand you correctly, your amendment would be not to move the 10-cent fee and the paper bag provision to the list of strongly recommended in section 1, but just to make clear that it's optional, the fee is optional. And as I read the provision right now, whether to provide paper bags, recycled paper bags in the first place is optional. And you would make further optional whether to make the charge and leave it where it is. And I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
Are there other friendly amendments? Is there a second for Steve's motion, including the friendly amendment?
I will second that.
Okay, that brings us to a vote. Okay, I'm going to call you name by name. Let me get my list here. Okay, say yay or nay, whether you support or do not support Steve's motion. Ann Keller.
Yay.
Kim Austin.
Yay.
Tim Orman.
I'm going to go with the nay for now.
Chris Pelrine.
Yay.
Steve Barron.
Yay.
Allison Ormsby.
Yay.
And we still do not have Michael or Maggie present, right? They haven't joined. All right. So that leaves me. I am also a nay. So what is that vote, Bridget?
That was 2 nays, right?
Nays.
So then the motion carries.
Okay. 4-2, motion carries. All right, so now the Waste Reduction Group will continue with this correspondence to make this recommendation to council. Is that right, Allison?
Let's ask Bridget.
We'll take it on.
You
We're
will.
going to check in. Yeah. And we'll coordinate with the waste reduction working group and you all to make sure that it's reflective of your motion.
Okay. All right. So I have been reminded that I need to go back to Allison to discuss leaf bags.
Yes. Are we ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay. In a somewhat related topic, plastic topic, the waste reduction working group had already been working for 2 years on the topic of plastic leaf bags, right? So when people put their leaves out, you could use a paper bag or a plastic bag. And the plastic is really problematic. So we have been trying to discourage that use. And there is an existing ordinance that does mention plastic leaf bags. So you've been provided with a proposed change to that existing ordinance. So we're handling them separately, but it's under that plastic reduction theme. So that our working group supports this amendment to the existing ordinance. So we want to remove any language about plastic leaf bags, and we want to mandate biodegradable or paper, which are paper leaf bags. So I guess I'd be happy to respond to any questions about that. If anybody has questions. Steve does.
I looked at the amendment, and I couldn't see where the amendments themselves were. It was a pretty long ordinance.
Yes.
Did I just miss it, or could you show us where the amendments are, or at least describe?
I can describe. So you're right. It's not huge. It's just basically any place where the material of the bag is mentioned. It's been all mention of the word plastic has been removed, and some of those have just been changed to biodegradable bag.
Okay.
So it's fairly subtle, but it would be, so this is something that would really support the efforts of the solid waste workers for the city. And it would just make that shift.
Do I understand, Allison, that would include compostable plastic bags?
Well, I know, I was wondering if somebody might bring this up.
Which is an awful gray area.
It is a gray area. I don't think it would include that. Bridget, do you happen to remember?
You know, Jess is out of town, and she was like, "You're going to get a question."
Yep, and we just got it.
And this is it.
Okay.
I do not recall.
I'm jumping into that ordinance right now to see. But I'm pretty sure that
the definition is that a bag designated for use of waste contaminant and is biodegradable, so it can be processed and or composted with brush trimmings and or leaves. So if it was a compostable bag, I would think it would fall in that category, but I would have to get a definitive answer from Jess Foster when she's back in the office.
But I know that our working group worked closely with Jess, and Jess carefully wordsmithed the amendments to try to avoid that sort of gray area.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions for Allison? This is also a voting topic, so we will need a motion. So any discussion before the vote would be now is the right time for that.
Do I recall correctly that at one point the city did provide leaf collection bags and they don't anymore? Or am I crossing the streams here?
I think you're crossing the stream. So previously you're allowed to, you could use a reusable container or you could use plastic bags. And we had to work to allow the use of the paper bags to make sure that there was a provider that could take them and they could be composted and they could just be thrown into the brush collection truck without any additional processing. And so that was worked out And then since that time, there's been a collaborative effort with the Waste Reduction Working Group and the Sanitation Division to do an outreach and education campaign. I think Asheville Greenworks actually was involved in this as well. And so when the request for a plastic reduction policy came up, this was obviously top of mind because it was kind of in the work plan and being worked on presently.
Got it. Thanks. But there was never an initiative where the city provided paper bags to help with this transition, right?
Not since I've been a resident.
Okay.
To my knowledge.
Thanks for that clarification.
Does anyone want to take the honor of making the motion? Allison.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I move that we adopt the proposed language, amended language for the existing ordinance to ban plastic bags for leaf collection.
I second that motion.
Wonderful. I think that was Anne who said that. All right, let me get to my list of attendees here. I'll go in the same order, I hope. Ann Keller, yay or nay?
Yay.
Kim Austin.
Yay.
Tim Orman.
Yay.
Chris Pellrein.
Yay.
Steve Barron.
Yay.
Allison Ormsby.
Yay.
And myself, Anna Priest, is also a yay. Passes unanimously. All right. That brings us to number 5 on the agenda item. There's no new business. I don't believe there were any more comments that came in between now and the start of the meeting. Is that accurate, Bridget? Okay, great. Okay. Thank you all so much for your time. I will look forward to sending out information for our September board retreat and where that location is. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye-bye.